Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. Our guest today is Collin Jewett. Collin has written at least 2 books that I'm aware of. One is called Out of Your Wheelhouse. The other is The Superhuman Playbook. Collin is an industrial engineer, author, coach, and adventurer. He loves helping others rediscover the joy of learning and partner with their brains to unlock limitless memory, boundless creativity, and unshakable focus. Collin is going to talk today about the 3 critical brain states to optimize your mind for the task at hand and how to switch back and forth between them. And welcome to the show, Collin Jewett.
Hey, Joanne. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, how did you get here, Collin, that you're writing books and you're teaching people how to access 3 critical brain states to date, at any rate? And, what's your path?
Sure. So, long story short, I was a struggling student in college. I was studying engineering, and I was almost failing out. I was kind of on that borderline, and being on the borderline of failure does not get you super far in the field of engineering. So I was definitely concerned, and it wasn't for lack of trying either. I was working very hard. I was studying very hard. I was doing all the things that you're always told to do to have academic success. And so at that time, I was pretty distressed. I was looking for really anything that could help me get an edge or somehow just get up to average, honestly, at that point. And I was very fortunate there's kind of a long path here, but I'll shorten it up for the show. I was very fortunate to come into contact with Jonathan Levy. If your listeners haven't heard of him, he's kind of a big name in the accelerated learning space. And through some of his guidance and some help, that really started my journey of understanding that you have a relationship with your brain that is either an antagonistic one. You're either fighting it all the time. You have things that you want to do and you can't seem to do them and you don't know why. I would call that fighting your brain. Or you can partner with your brain and it can be your greatest ally. And I realized after doing some work with him and doing some of my own self-exploration that I had spent a lot of my time in my life, especially in college, fighting my brain. And that's why I was not having success. And so learning to switch that, learning how to partner with my brain, that is really the journey I've been on. That's the journey I've been helping other people go on. And I think that's to answer your question, how did I get here? I think that's the journey that's brought me here.
That's interesting. I had a recent guest I have a lot of people who talk about the brain and its fluidity and how you can train the brain, to respond properly in a positive way, because the brain will listen to anything you tell it. Do you adhere to that? Yeah, I would nuance it, but yeah, I agree with the general theory. Right. Yeah, and it's what we tell the brain that becomes a problem when we're hitting walls. And I guess you've hit a few, and I know our listeners have hit a few times 1,000. So what I'm curious about is your website address is called curiosityjump.com. Why, when you chose that, what made you? I'm curious as to why you chose Curiosity Jump and what it means to you.
Yeah, so I did put a lot of thought into that. One thing is I wanted my initials to be the
that's great.
So that was one reason. I really wanted curiosity and I wanted something active because one thing that I've learned is the importance of making conscious decisions towards taking action when it comes to curiosity, and that's how learning happens. And it's all about. I really like saying jump specifically because I think that we learn by essentially diving into the darkness, running towards the unknown. And I don't really think there are too many other words that would capture that as well. It's like, it really is a jump, because it's like a leap of faith. You jump into the unknown and you don't know what you're going to find there.
That's why it's called the unknown. I mean, people are afraid to do that. A lot of people I come across, they just want to keep on this very narrow path, and they want to predetermine where they're going to go when their life is changing second by second, but they want to have that control. And I think that's a problem myself, trying to control your life and not manage, but control, so that you're going to go from here to there in a specific way. Do you find that stops people from growing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. I think there's really, really good reasons to be terrified of the unknown. I don't think it's really irrational, though there are rational components to it. But everything that kills us is, in some sense, the unknown.
What do you mean when you say kills us? Kills our ideas, kills our energy, kills our...
No, I mean literally.
Oh, that. Okay. Yeah, that unknown. I don't want to have any relationship with that unknown for a long time.
Yeah, well, I think that is the unknown that we have to charge towards, in a sense, though. I mean, it's essentially our limitation that literally kills us in a lot of ways. But it's also, if you don't explore that, if you don't run towards that darkness, then your limitations never expand. And I think that's been the story of the human race over time. You know, it's been, you try something new and maybe it kills you. And if it doesn't kill you, you've learned something that's helpful to keep you alive.
Well, I agree. You know, you either learn or you could either learn or die, but nothing is a real mistake, except if you die, you know, that there's dark, if you die, really die, what have you given up? What have you lost?
Right. Yeah. So I have a phrase I like to use a lot, and I think this quote comes from somewhere, but I think it's been muddied up by so many people saying it. But this idea that there's no failure, only feedback. And I think that's it's easy to grasp conceptually, like why that's important to understand. But I think it's something that's really difficult for people to really implement in their lives. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of them is that a lot of people define success either as attaining the goal, reaching a goal that they've set, or making progress towards the goal. And both of those things sound really good. They sound rational. They are rational. They make a lot of sense. But the problem with both of those is that they cause you to prioritize making errors of omission. In other words, staying in the same place rather than making errors of commission, which would be, somewhat equivalent to moving backwards. And if you prioritize making errors of omission, if you have the idea that it's actually better to stay where I am than it is to move backwards, what you'll end up doing is staying where you are your whole life. And it's a hard thing for people to...
No, I totally agree. I totally agree, and I understand that. And I think people, they're not willing to take chances or risks, whatever you want to call it. I mean, to me, a risk sounds bigger than a chance, and they're not willing to let go of something that they haven't achieved successfully, whatever that's been written down, opposite of failure. Oh, we did it this far, let's just continue, even though they should just throw down the chute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people are not willing to let go. Oh, it's worked so far. Let's, change our body, change our minds, and we'll make this work. Well, that's dumb. Really, because it's like, why don't you just dump it, start all over again with something new?
I think that's a perfect segue into the brain states discussion. If you'd like to jump into that,
go for it.
Awesome. Yeah. So. You mentioned the 3 brain states. That's one thing I think your audience would really benefit from. So I'll talk through that a little bit. We can have some back and forth. That'll be great. So the 3 brain states that I'm referring to, they're really practical labels. They do have analogs in actual brain activity, but those are somewhat fuzzy. So really what I'm talking about is practical things that you can understand about how things feel and how your thinking can change and how you can really take advantage of different modes of thinking. That's another way to say brain states in this case, in order to be more effective in anything that you're doing, and also enjoy it a lot more and make it more pleasurable, make it more successful, all those things. So I have a quick question for you. And my question is, when do you find that you have your most inspiring and best ideas?
If you're referring to time of day, I would say in the middle of the night, when I'm allegedly asleep or trying to sleep. I have a lot of good stuff that comes out then.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a great answer. There's lots of good reasons for that. So that leads us into, the brain state that I think I want to spend the most time on today. And I think because it is the least emphasized and the least well known, and that's the diffuse state. So we have 3 states. I'll go ahead and list them off. So if people are familiar or unfamiliar with these, there's the focused state, there's the diffuse state, which I'll talk about a little bit more, and then there's the flow state. So a lot of people have, especially recently, have heard about the flow state, something that people get really excited about, and it is exciting. It's really cool. And I think there's a lot of functional utility to the flow state. But I think a misunderstanding that people have, especially if they're kind of self-improvement junkies and they've stumbled across that term before, is like, ooh, I just want to be in the flow state all the time. That's the goal. Let's get in the flow state. Let's spend all my time in the flow state and I'll be super effective. And they find that, 1, they're not able to do that. And 2, when they're successful, they get burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
because they're actually, the flow state, if they're searching for the flow, that's very exhausting.
Yeah, it definitely can be. Yeah, for sure.
And that's why they get burned. I think it's one of the reasons they get burned out, because they're searching for something rather than just being with themselves. But that's my perspective.
Yeah, and it's really both, because if you do access that flow state, which is also called, more technical term would be transient hypofrontality, which is a fancy word for just saying like the front of your brain is less active, the back of your brain is going to be more dominant in that case. Mm-hmm. So like a very brief brain anatomy, big picture, you can think cerebral cortex, that's kind of the outer layer in front of your brain. That's more developed in humans. That's where a lot more of like what you'd consider to be conscious thoughts are, that kind of thing. Whereas the back or lower down, deeper in the brain, you're going to get a lot more of those really old systems that you're going to find in like reptiles and animals and all sorts of things that drive a lot of your
reptilian brain.
Yeah, it's called that for good reason. And those things that drive a lot of those unconscious processes. So what we call the flow state is an actual activity state in the brain in which the lower parts, those deeper parts that are more involved with unconscious or automatic behavior, are more active. And it's actually more defined by the fact that more the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobes are less active. So you're going to get like that inner critic is going to shut up, which is kind of nice. That sense of time is really going to disappear. You're going to feel like it's timeless. That sense of limitation and boundaries is going to fade. And that can be a really pleasurable experience. It can also be a state in which you're very effective at certain things, because stuff that's automated is a lot more efficient, a lot faster than stuff you have to think about really hard. So for those reasons, like the flow state, great state to be in, feels great, and can be really great for a lot of things. But it's also biologically expensive. So if you listen to experts talking about the flow state, they'll also say you can't spend all your time there. You really need a cycle. And if you're there all the time or more frequently than you should be, you're going to find that you literally feel like someone has kind of pulled out your insides, like emptied out. Like that's the experience you'll have. So yeah, today I want to talk about like, okay, well, if we're not just chasing the flow state or not just spending all of our time in the flow state, like some people might be tempted to think you should do, what are the other options and why are they useful? So we can kind of jump into that.
Okay.
All right. So I asked you when you feel like you have your most inspiring or your best ideas, and you said middle of the night, which is a great response. I think that'd be a common response. Some other things I hear a lot are early in the morning, right after you wake up, right before you fall asleep. Sometimes when people wake up in the middle of the night, they'll find it's like kind of eureka moments, or also like in the shower, on long walks,
sure.
Riding a bike, things like that, driving in the car. And there's good reason for that. So I'm gonna actually first do the focus state, because I think once I do that, the diffuse state will make a lot more sense. So the focus state is the state where most people spend most of their time. And that is going to be more, so we talked about hypofrontality, where the front of the brain is less active. This is going to be where the front of the brain is more active. So it's going to be where you've got more conscious thought going on, where your awareness of time is really all the way up. The sense of boundaries is really there. That inner critic is going to be, as loud as it can get, pretty much. And that is where a lot of people find themselves kind of all the time, especially if you find yourself in like a chronic state of kind of low grade stress, which is, very common in today's world. You're probably in the focus state most of the time. So, you're thinking consciously, you're working through problems, and the focus state, it's good for problem solving. It's good for, especially solving problems that are, what do you call it? They're not necessarily, how would I say that? They're not necessarily in your wheelhouse, to slightly quote my book.
Right. Yeah, I find that when people are in the focus state, what you're talking about right now, I can't be in it for more than 45 minutes at a time, because it burns my brain. And I think that that's what people do, is they stay in it too long on that push, I got to make it happen focus state. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's exhausting for lots of reasons. I mean, if you think about that inner critic, if your inner critic's on all the time, like, that's not fun. You don't want to be listening to that all the time. But also, the focus state, it doesn't necessarily mean you're like super focused, which is, kind of weird, but it doesn't necessarily mean like you're being productive. I guess that's a better way of putting it. It doesn't mean that you're being effective or efficient in your work. It just means that you're thinking about it in a very conscious way. And like you said, that can really burn you out. And it also, honestly, that's not the way that you want to solve problems a lot of times.
Correct.
So the reason that you describe having some of your best ideas in the middle of the night, and why people talk about having good ideas in the shower and that kind of thing, what they're describing is that third state. That's the diffuse state. So this is the state that I get really excited about, because it's something that people don't talk about very much. And a lot of times they think of it as being kind of the trash throwaway state, when in my opinion, it's one of the most important ones. I guess I only gave you 3. I would say it's like the most important one, in my opinion, for a lot of what people are trying to do in the modern world.
I think it's the best place to be, because it's relatively stress-free. You're not trying to make something happen. You're, we could say, going with the flow or words like that, but you are not pushing. And when you push, you're getting out of your brain lead that you were born with, because we're born with leads. And when you're trying to be something that you're not, that's where the exhaustion comes in. But if you're letting it come to you, which is internal, the brain comes out and it gives you information. Hi, Joanne, what do you want to do? You want to do this? And you go, yes, no, maybe, who knows? And it's less exhausting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything you just said is 100% correct. So I
got an A on my report card.
You did. Yeah. Yeah. I don't like grades, but I would give you an A if I
understand. Yeah.
But yeah, the diffuse state it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the state that you experience when you are kind of zoning out, when you're daydreaming, when you're not necessarily thinking about anything. And one thing that really separates it from the flow state and separates it from the focus state is the focus state and the flow state both tend to be highly task oriented. They're very focused on what are you doing? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? The diffuse state is not really like that. It's a state in which there is no part of your brain that's necessarily that you could classify as being the most active. It's kind of jumping around all over the place. Of course, it's going to be more active in the front for a little bit. It's going to jump to the back. It's going to jump all around. That's a very unscientific way of explaining it. But you're allowing your brain to kind of rest and figure things out while you're still awake. So when you're asleep, I don't know that I'd necessarily call it diffuse, but when it happens most naturally, right when you're waking up, and right before you fall asleep. So that's where, if you're familiar with brain waves and frequencies and everything, it's probably somewhere around alpha state. So maybe low beta, alpha, and that's when your brain's slowing down a little bit, but you're still awake, you're still conscious. And that's where you're going to have the most creative ideas. You're going to have a lot of ideas that make no sense and are useless, but you also have some of your best, most practical and useful ideas. And it's also relaxing, it's refreshing, it's restorative, and it's something that you can access really anytime if you train yourself to. And that is super, super powerful, because if you're the kind of person who gets into a task and you start working on it and you get stuck, and then you just grind away at it for hours, or like hit your head against your desk or something like that.
Right.
The diffuse state is what you're missing in your life.
Yeah,
and that's what's going to help you to get through those problems.
Yeah, that grinding, hitting your head on the desk kind of thing is not good. Seriously, people do that and to what ends? Because when they're done and you review what you've completed or think you've completed, you haven't gotten very far. You've just created drama, and everybody's attached to drama. I did this, we stayed up all night. Yeah, you can do that once in a while, but it's not safe for your brain and your body and your health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we live in a culture now that focuses a lot more on being busy than it is focused on being healthy or productive. And if you are the kind of person who's like, well, I can always sacrifice sleep and get more work done.
No.
Just one warning about that. First of all, it doesn't work. It's not only diminishing returns, but you're going to stop getting returns altogether. But also, things like Alzheimer's have been connected. I think this was relatively recently. This research was done that showed that one of the best predictors of Alzheimer's is poor sleep quality over the course of time. So,
right. I read that.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing, because I wouldn't doubt that these people that have been in that cycle, poor sleep patterns, Alzheimer's, then death or whatever, or have not had problems when they were younger and pushing, trying to make something happen. And it wouldn't be that they had to be in business, just being in life, there's a lot of control involved with that. A lot of control about how they want their life to be. The rigidity of holding on to this American dream dynamic, which is crap, and but holding on to things way something should be. It should be what it is, not what you think it should be, and that creates a problem. And then you're up all night trying to fix what it should be, and then you die. So, what have you accomplished? I believe everybody is here to contribute what their gift is. And you cannot contribute what your gift is if you don't have a good night's sleep, or at least a half a good night's sleep. And if you don't get out of this, flow and focus, and then go into the diffuse and it's a balance of all three.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I'm sure that I hope you're talking about, a balance, some equanimity there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what it's all about. I think most people spend most of their time in the focus state and most of their time trying to get into the flow state, and not recognizing the value that each role or each state plays in those different modes of thinking, the value that they have. And so I guess one thing I want to share with your listeners, I think it's probably obvious at this point from the conversation that we had, but really how you go about switching between them. And so it can be really difficult, especially if you haven't really thought about this or done this before, because it does require, like we talked about, letting go, which is not an easy thing to do. But with the diffuse state, usually what I have people do, because data-driven solutions are usually the best solutions, and so reflect on your own life and reflect on when you have felt like you've been in that state, when you found yourself letting go, daydreaming. Maybe it's when a lot of people tell me it's when they go on walks, take a shower, ride a bike, something like that. When does that happen for you, when you feel like you can let go and you can let your brain kind of just do its thing, and when you have those good ideas, and start to practice, what would you say, finding space in your day and finding space in your life for times like that. And especially as you do that, you'll find that you feel better, you have better ideas, And that data will drive new beliefs and show you that, hey, this is something I can do. Not only can I do it, but I should do it. And it actually gives me better results. And as you start to build that, you see that you'll start to find more and more space for it. And I think you'll find your results keep getting better. You keep feeling better, and hopefully you end up being a little bit more sane. So to poke at the show name there.
That's okay. I agree with you. And that's one of the reasons sanity is in the topic, is in the title, because people, you can't tell people, they have to be more sane, because what do they know about that? So I just create the opportunity for guests such as yourself to come on and give different perspectives of how they can live a better life. I mean, I know I tell clients, whoever they are, mark off a weekend, a half day a week, expand it to a day a week, take a weekend off a month, take 2 weekends off a month, take 2 weeks off every quarter. I know friends who take a week off every month and just shut down everything. And, they happen to be able to do that, and they're outdoors. And it's you need, the body and the mind need to stop in that push, the focus aspect. Because otherwise you're not going to last very long.
Yeah, that's true.
You just won't. And you have things to contribute to society, to Earth. You're here for a reason. You're not here because you're an idiot. So, sorry, but, you're here to contribute. How can you do that if your brain is fried?
Absolutely. I'd be curious to hear from you on this, because I've found in my work with people that most people who say that they're really busy don't have a time problem. And what they have is some sort of attention or energy problem or clarity problem or something deeper. And they can't recognize that until they let themselves take time off, separate.
You and I have the same 24 hours a day as does heads of countries, a pope, of anybody. We have the same hours. So you don't run out of time. You run out of the management of yourself in the context of what you're doing. And if you decide you're just going to work an hour a day, which I know a lot of people who do, and they do quite well. I'm not there yet. I'm trying. But, they're just going to work an hour a day, and it's focused, and they walk away, and they're happy. And yet other people can't find enough time in the day because they're trying to, it's some other thing that they're dealing with. It has nothing to do with the work. It has nothing to do with the job. It has nothing to do with the 24 hours. It has to do with the fact that, they were screwed up when they were kids, and they're trying to compensate or overcompensate. So you have to find what works for you. And I hate to use the word balance. I prefer harmony. I don't believe in life balance. I believe in life harmony. If you want to work, work. If you want to play, play. If you want to read a book, read a book. If that's play or work, depending, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. You just have to find out how it works for you and stop bitching about it. Excuse me. But, seriously, I haven't got enough time in the day. Who does? And does it matter? How important are you? I don't think Elon Musk says he runs out of time. He might get tired and be less creative that particular day, but he has people to jazz him up. So, there's different ways of doing it. So you're talking about flow, focus, and diffuse. So could you restate those definitions before we...
Yeah, absolutely.
Get towards the end.
Yeah, for sure. So focus state, from a brain activity standpoint, it's going to be a little bit more towards the front. And it tends to be very task oriented. It tends to be the state that you're in with kind of low grade stress, and your inner critic's going to be loudest. Your sense of boundaries is going to be the strongest. Your sense of time is going to be the strongest, and it is good for problem solving until you get stuck and you need a creative solution. And it's when it's no longer so good. So that's the focus state. Most people spend most of their time there. The flow state, it's characterized by much less activity in the front of the brain, which is why you lose that sense of boundary, sense of time. The inner critic shuts up. And it's really good for tasks in which you are highly competent and that require a lot of skill. But the competence is really important there, because the whole reason that you get in that state to begin with is because there's a lot of automated processes the back, the lower parts of the brain that are able to run to do those things. And you can't do that if it's something new that you have no experience with, because there's nothing automated built there to do it. So that's the flow state, which is really cool, but it is expensive, biologically speaking. And then there's the diffuse state, which is not characterized by activity in any specific part of the brain. It's more of kind of when you let things go. It's not as task oriented at all as the other two, but it's really good for coming up with ideas. And a lot of those ideas, like I said, not necessarily going to be that useful. But if you think about it, let's say you have a good idea out of every one, or one in every 1,000 ideas is something that's actually useful and good. Well, if you're in the focus state, you're going to have maybe 5% of the ideas that you have in the diffuse state. So just a matter of statistics, which one do you want to be in? If you want to have a good idea, it's going to take a really, really long time to have those ideas in the focus state. It's going to take a lot less time in the diffuse state. So if you're just playing the numbers game, that's where you want to be for creative solutions.
And again, I would say, don't follow what other people are doing. It's been in my brain here now for a few minutes, because that's what happens when people in the diffuse state get lots of ideas. And does it fit into your life, or are you just going to go do it for the hell of it? What are you trying to prove when you go and, take on a task that's going to last, 500 years when you can't get it done? So it's an avoidance technique, actually. So I want to thank Collin Jewett for being here today, and I want to remind my listeners, as I do with every episode, when you take this your headphones off when you're driving, or however it is that you're listening to Collin speak about the 3 states of the brain, the diffuse, the focus, and the flow, get yourself a pen and paper. I know everybody's attached to the computer and to the word processor and writing things down, but unless you write with your hand, your right brain is not going to attach to all that you've put in your left brain by listening to this podcast. You need your feelings, you need your emotions to go in with this as well. So take notes, because Collin has said a lot. I've overtalked this time, but it's an exciting topic, and I'm glad Collin brought all these things up. And then share this podcast with your friends, with your family, with your frenemies, with your enemies, whoever it is. It really doesn't matter. Just share it. And I appreciate Collin Jewett being here today with his topic. And don't forget, his website is curiosityjump.com. And his books are Out of Your Wheelhouse and The Superhuman Playbook. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience, Collin?
Yeah, sure. I'll pitch one more thing here. So if the topic of the show has been really interesting to you, if this is something you want to dive deeper into, if you want to learn how to partner with your brain more effectively, learn faster, unlock your memory and your creativity, all of those things, I do teach a live course. It's really, really cool because you get to interact with other people all over the world who are interested in this kind of thing too. And we dig through it for 4 weeks together. And you can find that course on maven.com. It's called Discover Your Inner Superlearner. The next cohort will be probably in a few months. I haven't decided on the date yet, but if that's something you're interested in, you can join the waitlist there.
Okay, Discover Your Inner Super
Learner.
Okay. All right, I'll make sure that is on the page that's on my website so that people can access it. I thank you very much for that tip. I hate the word tip, for that information. Tip just seems so trite. This is more than trite. Collin's information is what everybody needs right now today, okay? So thank you, Collin, for being here. Thank you, listeners, for listening, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Joanne.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.